Hello, friends and family. This is Hector Combo, your friend. On today's episode for April the 2nd, I will be talking about what the experts are saying about the coronavirus. Today, we're going to deconstruct our fear, but before we get started with all the sources and what the experts say, let's read this quote from Albert Camus in his book, The Plague. And it's a very poignant quote. And the context of this quote is people in the book, the story, the novel, they're acting mad, full of fear, and they're compromising their principles and, in fact, acting irrationally. And they're not following their inner self, their true path of who they are. So I think it is really on point. Here it goes. There is no question of heroism in all of this. It is a matter of common decency. That's an idea which may make some people smile, but the only means of fighting a plague is common decency. So I think it's important to us to understand that it is honesty, responsibility, virtue, and understanding and clarity of mind that is going to get us through this fear pandemic. And so let's start off with our first sourced article from the experts. And this is not an appeal to authority. Let's just really be frank with one another. I'm not an expert. I'm not here. I don't know all the facts. I don't know all the data points. But from what I am seeing and from my research, the data that is being promoted by government is overestimated, and they're pushing an agenda that is so convenient to their scheme of centralizing power in the hands of the few. So here in this scientific article, Fear versus Data, SARS-CoV-2. And it's important for us to really go into it on our own individual time for limited times. And for the reason that this is so limited, I'm just going to go read the abstract for you. This article compares the incidence and mortality rates of these four common coronaviruses, with those of SARS-CoV-2 in Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries. It is concluded that the problem of SARS-CoV-2 is probably being overestimated, as 2.6 million people die of respiratory infections each year, compared with less than 4,000 deaths for SARS-CoV-2 at the time of writing. So the abstract pretty much declares that it is most likely an overestimate of deaths. So let's go to another expert. What does this person say? Deadly Medicines and Organized Crime, a blog about drugs. And the author is Professor Peter C. Goodsky. And he says the World Health Organization estimates that an influenza season kills about 500,000 people, or about 50 times more than those who have died so far during more than 3 months of the coronavirus pandemic. The panic looks like an unfortunate overreaction. We don't even know if the risk of dying if you get infected with coronavirus is higher than if you get influenza or so many other virus infections. And most of those who die are old and suffer from comorbidity, just like for influenza. Comorbidity essentially means there is not just one virus, illness, disease present in the fatality, but it's most likely one of many reasons that they're death. So to simplify it, most likely the people who are to die from the coronavirus usually have pre-existing conditions and are typically elder folk. Now, here comes another one. Now, the epidemiologist that is behind cited coronavirus model drastically downgrades projection. So it talks about Neil Ferguson, and this is an updated article, and it has his reply as to why he downgraded his model. But essentially, it talks about how the model projected 2.2 million dead people in the United States, and that has been downgraded to potentially 20,000 people, or far fewer people will die from the virus itself or from its agitation of other ailments. Again, agitation of other ailments, meaning comorbidity. So let's follow another important breakdown. So all these sourced articles are going to be posted below, so you can have all this at your disposal and you can question for yourself. And this follow-up article from judithcurry.com, it talks about updated data implies that UK modeling hugely overestimates the expected death rates from infection. And so it compares and contrasts a different study besides the Ferguson study. And it talks about the inconsistencies and just the over projections. And again, I recommend for you to go into it for yourself in case that you want to break free of your enslavement towards fear. That's the whole agenda here. Fear, pump and dump fear. Now, COVID-19, navigating the Uncharted. And here is a scholarly article from Anthony S. Fauci. You probably recognize that name. And he's one of the government-sanctioned medical experts that all the talking heads in the mainstream media bring about and ask, are we going to die? Is the world going to end? And so he says whatever tune he chooses to say at the particular time. But anyways, in this article, something really pops out at me, and it's important for us to understand it, or at least look into it. And it says, this suggests that the overall clinical consequences of COVID-19 may be ultimately be more akin to those of a severe seasonal influenza, which has a case fatality rate of approximately 0.1%. So if this is too fast for you and I'm going through too much data, let's just recap what we learned or what we covered. And what we covered here are the main bullet points. It's most likely an overestimated projection. The model is most likely, not as bad as being projected. It has been downgraded. And, we don't have reliable data to really understand what is the infection rate. There's no random sampling that tells us effectively, without bias, that, what is the real statistical analysis of the infection rate. And here we're going to follow up another expert. And what is he saying? This is from an article, statnews.com, while we're talking about statistics. A fiasco in the making. As the coronavirus pandemic takes hold, we are making decisions without reliable data. That's the important part here. And let me just take a brief pause. In a previous episode, I've talked about how the greatest trick that the government bureaucrats pull on us is through statistics and models. So they can fudge the numbers through the economy. They can fudge the numbers through their medical charts. Essentially, statistics is a way for the government to play their dirty tricks. And so that is why government solutions are usually not very effective, and they're counterproductive, and they exacerbate problems. But let's see what this expert has to say. And this expert, his name is by John P.A. Ioannidis. And what are his credentials? I wonder, is it just a random guy in the internet? So let's read what this person is all about. About the author, John P. A. Ioannidis is a professor of medicine and professor of epidemiology and population health, as well as professor by courtesy of biomedical data science at Stanford University School of Medicine. So the guy looks accredited, not just some random YouTuber who likes anarchy, freedom, and peace, Anyways, the data collected so far on how many people are infected and how the epidemic is evolving are utterly unreliable. Given the limited testing to date, some deaths and probably the vast majority of infections due to SARS-CoV-2 are being missed. We don't know if we're failing to capture the infection by a factor of 3 or 300. 3 months after the outbreak emerged, most countries, including the United States, lack the ability to test large numbers of people, and no countries have reliable data on the prevalence of the virus in a representative random sample of the general population. This evidence fiasco creates tremendous uncertainty about the risk of dying from COVID-19. Reported case fatality rates, like the official 3.4 from the World Health Organization, and remember, be afraid. Ugh. Cause horror and are meaningless. Patients who have been tested for SARS-CoV-2 are disproportionately those with severe symptoms and bad outcomes. As most health systems have limited testing capacity, selection bias may be even worse in the near future. Selection bias. That is what is making these rates of infection seem so extraordinarily bad. That is what is keeping the doom and gloom, the statistics. And again, from the previous articles, we just kind of glanced at it's an overestimate. There is no reliable data, it seems. And for those people who do create the models, and are being used by official sources, they're downgrading it. They're I'm not saying that they're wrong. They just some new shit came to light, and they have updated their models, and we're not gonna die, guys. We'll be fine. The major problem is the shutdown of the economy, and we'll get to that in a very short minute. So let's listen to another expert, and this is a doctor from Swiss, and he also has an Albert Camus quote, but I think his is more concise and more contextually definite in this point. The only means to fight the plague is honesty. And I like to point to that quote again, because if we do not find truth in this fiasco, we're not going to find the solutions. Remember, what type of science are we advocating? Are we advocating for an open-ended science? And by open society, open research is what I mean. An open resource, an open source science. Or are we going with corporate-backed, government-approved science? So this is not an attack on the scientific method, on researching hypothesis and changing your models and things like that. No, this is something that as a community in this planet, on this earth, we as individuals need to actively participate in the process. We need to question the experts and realize that they themselves have a bias, and their bias might be not only a selective bias or a normalcy bias. It might be that they are trying to expand an agenda which will give them more power, or at least gives them a reason or validation to continue in their position of power. That's an important thing. It's an important thing for us to consider, because this is not just some guy on YouTube talking about this. This is the world shutting down, and there's a reason that they do that for. And we'll cover that later on another episode. This just, sorry for the rant. Let's continue with the expert. All right, northern Italy has one of the oldest population and the worst air quality. Oh, an environmental element to this whole problem. The sauce thickens, as they say, in Europe, which had already led to increased number of respiratory diseases and deaths in the past, and is likely an additional risk factor in the current epidemic. South Korea, for instance, has experienced a much milder course than Italy and has already passed the peak of the epidemic. And South Korea, only about 70 deaths with a positive test results have been reported so far. Okay, the few dozen test positive Swiss deaths so far were also high-risk patients with chronic disease. An average age of more than 80 years and a maximum age of 97 years, whose exact cause of death, i.e. from the virus or from their pre-existing disease, not yet known. Comorbidity. Remember that word, comorbidity. It's not just one coronavirus and that's it, you die. It's most likely elderly folk with pre-existing conditions that get the coronavirus and then die. So it might not even be the coronavirus that gives them the last bullet. Furthermore, studies have shown that the internationally used virus test kits may give a false positive result in some cases. In these cases, the persons may not have contracted the new coronavirus, but presumably one of the many existing human coronaviruses that are part of the annual and currently ongoing common cold and flu epidemics. Thus, the most important indicator for judging the danger of the disease is not the frequently reported number of positively tested persons and deaths, but the number of persons actually and unexpectedly developing or dying from pneumonia. So here's an important thing, because every other time you are with a peer or turning on to the corporate control media, they will talk about, confirmed cases of corona, another confirmed cases of corona. And it keeps you in this beat of fear, in this humdrum drone effect, in the sense that fear coming at you from your friends, family, fear coming at you from the media, fear coming from the experts, and you just staggering back. Now let's look at it with clarity. Let's be honest. Let's have some common decency in what we're doing. Does this mean that we should not take precautions? Maybe, I don't know, take better care of ourselves and use this as an opportunity to improve ourselves? No, that doesn't mean that. It just means we should not let ourselves be beguiled by those people in authority. We need to question that. All right, let's follow up. Again, since everyone reports Italy as, a great indicator of how we're going to all die, and I guess I'm just being fastidious on this, but really, I'm not trying to be mean to anyone who really takes this seriously. I'm just trying to break you free of your fear indoctrination. Okay, so in this article, it talks about how in Italy, only 12% of COVID-19 deaths list COVID-19 as cause. Reports show up to 88% of Italy's alleged COVID-19 deaths could be misattributed. It's another fancy word for, I don't know, overestimated, lied, false, fraud. I don't know, but that's just me. Maybe I'm just being very cynical and very skeptical. But let's pull back a little bit and see what they say. The way in which we code deaths in our country is very generous in the sense that all people who die in hospitals with the coronavirus are deemed to be dying of the coronavirus. On reevaluation by the National Institute of Health, only 12% of death certificates have shown a direct causality from coronavirus, while 88% of patients who have died have at least one premorbidity. Many have had two or three. Premorbidity, comorbidity, premorbidity, comorbidity, pre-existing conditions in people who have different types of risk factors. And usually they're the older folks. And in this article, the demographics in Italy this article says that demographics in Italy, usually they have more elder folks. And again, to the previous article, there is one of the worst air qualities in Europe. So, and it's a pneumonia. It's coronavirus attacks, the lungs supposedly, and it keeps you, with phlegm, and it keeps you sick, and it gives you fever, and it's, makes you irritated. And that also could be a contributing factor, the elements in the environment, pollution. Okay, here comes the charts. The age of our patients in hospitals is substantially older than the median is. The median is 67, while in China it was 46, says Professor Riccardi. So essentially, the age distribution of our patients is squeezed to an older age, and this is substantial in increasing the lethality. Okay, and if you want to spend more time in discovering what experts who don't adhere to the centralized power narrative, meaning they don't want to shut down society, they don't want to destroy the organic, spontaneous mechanism of the free market, you can follow these articles, and it mentions different types of individuals who are speaking against this overestimated models that are creating irrationality and shutting down society. And so again, you're welcome to do that on your own, and they will be posted here. And so here I want to talk about another important, poignant article that people kind of missed. And they say, well, we couldn't predict this. The government has no way of mediating this fiasco. There was nothing that could be done. No way this could have been prevented. Okay, so now I'm going to point you to a Men's Health article, and it talked about a simulated event. And I'm not talking about Event 201. Look that up if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Crimson Contagion. Crimson Contagion. Beautiful color. Crimson, huh? The color of blood. A pandemic simulation called Crimson Contagion exposed weaknesses we are seeing now. So what type of weaknesses did they see? Oh my God. It could have not been predicted by anyone. This has totally caught us off by surprise. So the results were, okay, it says the report went to Congress. This report went to Congress as the time lays out, but little was done, paving the way for our current COVID-19 situation. It's a chilling reminder that far from being completely unpredictable, today's pandemic and the massive problem responding to it were actually easy to calm. And so this report of a pandemic simulation was passed on to Congress. And of course, Congress was too busy insider trading and sleeping at the wheel and, getting all the goodies that they can while the economy collapses. They're too busy with the real thing. They bother with this stuff? I don't think so. Government's here to help us. That's what they do. All right. So here's a very important PowerPoint that will help deconstruct the statistics. Remember, the devil lies and is a dirty trickster, but the way that the devil, and I see the government as the devil, that's the funny part in me, the devil lies in a very specific, very, very genius way, and it lies through the numbers, and it lies through the details. Remember, the devil is in the details. So here in this quick slides, I'm not going to go through it. Again, it will be posted below. Coronavirus, COVID-19, fact, not fear. A free choice to deconstruct your society is your prerogative. Okay, we put CV-19 into perspective. We're going to use official sources. from January 1st to March 21st, approximately COVID-19 scenario to date, 17 million people have died. They just didn't die of a media-focused issue. Overwhelmingly, these deaths were invisible to you. You did not fear them or react badly to them. 11,177 deaths, by contrast, have been presented as a massive crisis and a significant threat to your life. Is that true? Let's look at China, where the disease originated. And if you believe that, that's fine. I don't care. At this point, we're talking about the perception of people's reality and how to deconstruct that fear. So that's a moot point for another video. Okay, from thousands of new cases a day with 3,000 to 4,500 common, it is down to around 100 a day or less. So the idea was that there was going to be exponential infection and that it was just going to continue to rise and rise and rise until everybody's infected and we all die. Or, I'm sure that's what some people think. But what this slide says is actually, as it supposedly the exponential growth of infection, also there is an exponential decline of infection. Okay, so of the 27,000 people who die every day in China, 100 currently die from coronavirus. Of the 1.386 billion people in China, 3,276 died, or 3,276 died from confirmed cases from the coronaviruses. In the same period, 2.5 million Chinese died from causes which didn't make the Western news. In the worst hit province, Hubei, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, with a population of 59 million, 3,085 people died from the virus. In the same period, 86,000 people in the Hubei province died, just not from the virus. 67,794 cases in the population of 59.17 million represents the risk of catching the virus and showing symptoms at 0.11%. 3,085 deaths in a population of 59.7 million, 0.17 million represents the risk of dying from the virus at 0.005%. Facts, not fear. Compare that to the ordinary mortality rates in France by age. So risk of dying from non-virus causes at 18, 45, 75 overall. Anyways, in the worst hit province of China, at the healthiest age as an adult, you were 4 times more likely to die from other causes than the virus. And that disregards that the 0.005% is an overall rate for all ages. The actual risk to young people from the virus was far less than to old people. Okay, so we can continue on here, but it's important for us to remind ourselves that the risk factor, if you're a young, healthy individual and take care of yourself and are not in a toxic environment and don't have pre-existing conditions, the risk of you dying from coronavirus is very, very small. But the risk of shutting down the organic market, spontaneous free market, and I understand we live in a communist society now because everything is command and controlled, and the economy is basically staged, and it's really, there's no real indicator to understand where the direction of this country is besides people's irrationality, the poverty, and it's all the other stuff that is happening. And that's the main problem here. The main problem here is that we're not putting ourselves in check, and we're just letting authority figures dictate to us what will be the reality. Okay, so through all the blizzard of information that we went through, casually glancing at a surface level, we can see that there is a hint or a clue or a pattern that forms, and that pattern is showing a very, very poignant thing. There's a lack of evidence, there's a lot of bias, and there's a lot of fear flooding around. And it's important for us to be honest and question authority again, because if we just allow us to be bullied by pressure of, well, you should not question it, you should not compare it to other deaths, you should not look into other alternative viewpoints, then we're missing out on freedom. And I think this is quarantine, lockdown, Does it really matter? They have a National Defense Authorization Act that allows the president to call an emergency for any reason. So that's the main problem. The power at the people that, all this great power at the hands of the few is the problem. And it exacerbates the situation. And no, don't fall for it again. They're doing this to expand their power and control. That's the main objective. So again, this is your friend Hector Combo, keeping it brief or as much as I can for you to understand that breaking the construct of the control matrix is a high duty during this lockdown. Again, Hector Combo, your friend. Until then.